everybody. It's Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today, with any luck at all, we will finish up our discussion on managing emotions. And just as a bit of a preview, Tim has requested that our next subject get into the area of conflict. Conflict, how does it occur? Does the change grid kind of illustrate where potential conflicts might live? How do you go about resolving those conflicts, et cetera, et cetera. So he sent over a very interesting little chart that was trying to, let me see if I can find it real quickly, and I'll give you guys kind of like the gifted students quiz real quick. Tim, feel free to unmute if you'd like to share what our thoughts are. We're talking about as far as conflict goes.
Yeah, hi everyone. Yes, just I'm actually about to do some work with a client looking at resolving conflict within their organization between two segments of their structure. And so Tia and I were just having a conversation yesterday and thought that it might be interesting as I was looking at this particular grid, you see how that may plot out on the change grid. And I just thought that that would be some interesting discussion.
Yeah. And so so I thought, well, we'll take a quick glance at this and let's see if we can figure out quickly enough, does this overlay on the chain? We won't get into any big discussion, but the two, and I don't know where this came from. Obviously, you don't see any citation about who came up with this or where this was found. So it's just one of those things. It's floating around out there. But level of cooperation ranging from low to high versus level of competitiveness ranging from low to high. And if you have a very high level of competitiveness, but a low level of cooperation, that's where they would say you are in competition. If you have high competitiveness and high cooperation, that's what collaboration is. And if you got low competitiveness and high cooperation, that's accommodation. And give them both lows and you end up with avoidance. Smack dab in the middle is compromise. And so we took a very quick look at this just to say, I wonder if this overlays on the change grid and how. So anyone want to throw out the 60 seconds of thought answer to the question? Any ideas? What
I would say that collaboration, compromise, and competition are more of an outgrid behavior. Accommodation and avoidance would be more in-grid behaviors.
Yeah, yep. And so we were trying to figure out whether or not this stretches all the way to the edges of the change grid or if it's confined more to the middle. Is this all inside of the outgrid quadrant? Does this radiate from the center of the change grid? So these are the kinds of things we're going to want to explore. But just as a preview, I will tell you, we did figure out, lo and behold, it overlays, which should be no surprise because we've learned over all these years that any tool that seems to make sense standing by itself will make even more sense if we integrate it with what we know of the change grid and everything else that's come from the merging of brilliance exercises. So that's our little preview. How does this all work? How does it fit into conflict resolution? So that's your preview coming to you on Thursday.
And T, I'll drop that link in the chat if anyone wants to take a look at it before our next.
Oh yeah, great. Feel free. Yeah, because good luck doing that because I'll tell you, we're using the Zoom webinar feature right now. And unless they've changed things in webinar, you cannot share a document. So in Zoom meeting, you can. Oh, wait a second. Maybe they enhanced it. Yeah, Tim just sent you a link and I just sent you the document. No, host and panelists. I got to change that. 1 second. I'll send it to everyone. Here you go. Yeah, honestly, it's not all that long ago. You could not share a document in Zoom webinar, which made no sense to me whatsoever, but nevertheless could be done. Okay, so with that, let's get into where we left off. We talked about, well, where does shame live on the change grid? Where does pride live on the change grid? And basically what we found out was that there is a certain kind of shame that is happening at each of these extremes, but it may not be experienced and expressed overtly. So for example, the person in the outgrid danger zone who believes their ability is extremely high, the challenge is very high, they're that superhero kind of complex. This is also where narcissism lives on the change grid. That individual would probably never recognize, never express that what they're feeling is any degree of shame whatsoever. They won't acknowledge it, they won't admit it. But we know that underlying this kind of hyper aggressive, outgrid sorts of behavior, there is an underlying question mark at the very least about someone's level of self-esteem. So are they genuinely feeling what these locations on the change grid would indicate? Or are they just pretending to be doing that? So can you guys connect with what I've just said? There is shame underlying what's going on with that individual, but they would never express it. And if they are aware of it, or rather, I'm not even sure they're aware of it. Thoughts about that?
T, is it possible that a person who is in the outgrid danger zone feels shame for others for having lost?
Oh, absolutely. They can certainly find countless people to blame for whatever happened. They can be very critical, and so blaming them for that, trying to awaken shame in those individuals for failing to do whatever they want to do. But this individual who's out there is unlikely to share in that responsibility.
Right.
Whatever the outcome happens to be. It's just that it simply doesn't live outgrid. This individual, again, it could be because of narcissistic tendencies. It could also just be that this person has to have the belief system to end up there, that their ability is super high and the challenge is also super high. They're going above and beyond what mortal man would dare, try to address in their world. Yeah. So again, shame would live there, but not necessarily in the awareness of that individual. Shame might also live very far down grid, but this person's shame is different than the one over here. The down-grid danger zone is a place where someone is, well, look at it, very high level of ability, very low level of challenge. This is where mastery lives. This is where people kind of live in the successes of the past. So rest on their laurels. So they're all very, very confident in who they were and sometimes believe that that's who they still are. But at a certain level, we know that when we're looking at a down-grid plotting, we're looking at untapped potential. Because obviously, if you've got the ability to handle that level of challenge, can we step up the challenge a little bit, get you back into engagement and that? So we know this person is being underutilized. These are unfulfilled missions, unmet goals, whatever it is. So there is a little element of that quiet shame. Last time around, we talked about this is also where regret might live. So, at a certain point, you look back over your life and you just kind of go, coulda, shoulda, woulda. And that would also be living quite down-grid. Yeah. Again, people that far down-grid generally don't have a whole lot of problems. They've probably done well enough on their way of accomplishing what they've accomplished to end up there, that they're probably comfortable enough, but that doesn't mean it's as satisfying as someone who stays more engaged what's going on. Upgrid and ingrid are both far more likely to recognize and acknowledge the shame. The upgrid person obviously is in a situation tremendously high level of challenge with no ability to meet it. So they may very well end up feeling poorly prepared, and it's their own fault. So they're probably going to take hyper responsibility for whatever is going on that ended them up in this predicament they happen to be in. And the ingrid person has such a questionable level of self-esteem to start off with that they're likely to feel not only their own personal shame, but they're likely to absorb and share responsibility for things that weren't theirs to feel responsibility for. So they almost carry other people's shame as their own burden. So, okay, thoughts about what I've just shared there, Brian? You've unmuted. Any thoughts there?
I was going to ask a question, if I may.
Please.
So shame, you saying shame doesn't exist anywhere in terms of outgrid, or is it just it doesn't exist far out?
Oh, no. I was just talking about the outgrid danger zone where there is shame, but the person may not experience it and would be very unlikely to acknowledge
shame
it.
shifting.
Shame shifting is what we're going to be talking about next. So they could have been shame shifted. They could be doing shame shifting. But to Brian's other point, Brian, if I was right here at 1010 or 99, the great thing about this location on the change grid is this is where people who are on the pursuit of some sort of outcome are willing to acknowledge mistakes and correct behavior. So they may very well feel like, oops, missed that one, but they're not going to end up consumed by toxic shame. In Bradshaw's book, Healing the Shame That Binds Us, or Healing the Shame That Binds, that might be the actual name of it. He talks about shame as being a disease, and it is the disease that underlies all addiction. And that was his thing. He always talked about those kinds of behaviors. But one of the things that he makes a distinction about is toxic shame versus healthy shame. And so healthy shame is just that little bit of embarrassment that you might feel if you've committed some sort of a social faux pas, or you took a chance and you inconvenienced people, or you messed some things up. And so in that moment, you're kind of going like, geez, I'm so sorry that I did that. I don't know what I was thinking, but you're not going to become in any way debilitated by that shame. Toxic shame lives in all four danger zones. Healthy shame, I think, exists between the green line, the green circle, and the red circle. There's a little bit of healthy shame. And by the way, one of the reasons why I think healthy shame is such a vitally important concept for us to understand working with our clients is that a little bit of healthy shame is a very powerful motivator for behavioral change. And so if I didn't feel like something wasn't as it could be, should be, ought to be, whatever, then I'm not going to put much energy into changing it. So we have to look at what is the motivation underlying that change. And I think we could work our way all the way around this, and it does get into shame shifting, where I say, well, why does anybody want to be on this pursuit of greatness? What's driving that pursuit of greatness? Well, Bradshaw and many others who were contemporaries of his when Healing the Shame That Binds was written back in the 1980s, I do believe, would say to you that shame is part of the driving force. Feeling as though you are currently not good enough, so you need to become greater, or you haven't achieved what you could have achieved or you should have achieved, that you haven't risen to the occasion, blah, blah, blah. And so that's actually outgrid shame shifting, when no matter how good of a job you are doing, the message that you are giving yourself is that it's still not good enough. And so you push. So I could build the case that a certain degree of that is probably healthy. It's a good motivator, but at a certain point, does it not become self-destructive? So thoughts about that, anyone?
Yeah, that's a good example, because I was watching the Olympics and there was a race, the 100 meters, where the athlete, he knew what he had to do to qualify. Like, it was a qualifying round, and the only two who crossed the finish line qualifies. He let up disqualified himself, and in the aftermath of that, the commentators used the specific word shame, and he said, "Yeah, I made a mistake, a costly mistake." He didn't, use the word shame, but he kind of bought into the narrative, and I thought it was an interesting concept.
Yeah, and that's, I think, now you're teetering on that healthy, the border between healthy shame and toxic shame. Your sound dropped out there for just a second, but this was a race where at the very last second, the person who was in the lead decided to start slowing down, like he was already putting the brakes on. He hadn't crossed the finish line yet. And in those split seconds of him deciding to slow down, two people passed him. And that was that. So, you don't win the race till you cross the line. So, but you're correct there. Now the question becomes, did he end up beating himself up over and over again about that? Did he end up going and getting drunk and banging his head up against the law and the wall and all that? If he did, now we're into toxic kind of shame. We're on there, and he said, like, there was a lesson here for me to learn. I have learned it, and I shall not let this happen again.
T,
Yes.
I don't want to stir the pot, and if this is controversial, then we can certainly drop it. But I'm thinking of the name Simone Biles.
Oh, sure. Yeah, tell us a little bit about why Simone pops into place here.
Well, I think she went beyond the red circle and couldn't handle it.
Yeah. Now, what I would be wondering about, because, obviously I don't know a lot about it. I just know what her decision was, but I don't know a lot about what underlying it. I wonder if something moved her very far up grid, and that's what triggered it, versus an out grid kind of a thing. Only because if she was out grid, she would have gone ahead and fight her way through it. And then if, because of whatever she was going through, her performance faltered and she ended up losing, then would she feel that shame? That's not kind of how I perceive what her decision was as it was being presented to us.
Well, I heard that she had a questionable landing on a vault, and it kind of shook her.
It definitely shook her. In fact, I had read a lot about that. No one has known yet. Brian, you're the doctor on the call, so you could get into this, but something has really screwed up her equilibrium. And when she's in any kind of like a twisting motion, she ends up becoming dizzy midair. And that's where she became concerned that a lot of the skills that she exhibits, if she doesn't land them right or whatever, they could be very, threatening or, dangerous, if not deadly, to what's going on. But I also heard that she had a whole lot of memories come back about how she was treated by that Nasser guy long ago, and I know that her aunt had just passed away, and so there's some things that were really going on that make me feel maybe it was more of an upgrade kind of a situation, and because of her equilibrium issue, she could do that. So, Brian, is it theoretically possible that someone who has devoted decades of their life to spinning and twisting midair suddenly has problems from spinning and twisting midair?
Yes, they can be overwhelmed, because remember, any kind of emotion first starts physiologically, and so it could disrupt their spatial awareness.
Yeah.
And that's why their sports is particularly dangerous. I think they coined it the twisties, and that simply means like when they're in the air, they have to like literally, just like a sniper, they have to literally focus in the air because they're trying to stick this landing without getting hurt. And I've seen athletes have their necks snap and things because they lost that focus and that concentration in midair. It's just not a good situation.
Yeah. And I think the other two, if we can add this into the mix, obviously she's an astounding gymnast. So whatever happened at the Olympics, it'll be an interesting discussion for a long time to come. But I know, and I'm no Olympic gymnast, but if I've flown across overseas to do even a training program, I'm not quite right for a few days after landing there. So my equilibrium is thrown off, my sleep pattern is thrown off, my eating patterns are thrown off, etc. And if little old me ends up, screwed up by such a thing, add that element to it as well. And, who knows what's really going on. But good point there, David. It's still, nevertheless, how does she feel around it? We just want to make sure that whatever she's feeling is not toxic shame, because toxic shame doesn't help anybody anywhere. All right, so let's get into the discussion about shame shifting. Shame shifting is something that, generally speaking, another person does to you. So person A does to person B. So, and the reason why person A is doing this is because they know that the more they can move you away from the center of the change grid, mind you, they've never seen a change grid. So nevertheless, conceptually, they know that by getting you away from this place of logic and balance and all those good sorts of things, pride, all that good sort of stuff that lives inside of this green circle, that you become easier and easier to manipulate. So there's a lot of times when this shows up. I'll give you one example of outgrid shame shifting. Outgrid shame shifting occurs very frequently in traditional sales organizations. So the managers look at sales performance, and no matter what it is that you perform, they find issue with it. They always believe you're capable of more, you drop the ball, you're not as good as you think you are. They throw these elements of I want to say question about your abilities, your integrity, your whatever, because people who are already outgrid respond to what I'll just call fighting words. So if you're going to say I can't do something, I will do it or die trying. That's the mindset of this outgrid individual. So the more I can send you these shame sort of messages, you're not good enough, you drop the ball, you know, blah, 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 the more you might get your ire up. That will ultimately result in you putting more energy into doing whatever it is.
Maybe so, T, but those people are on the bubble as it relates to loyalty to the company.
Oh yeah, yeah. Tell us more about that. Are you talking about on the
Oh,
management side, or are you talking?
Yeah. Well, no, the employee side. I mean, you know, I do a lot of cultural stuff, and Human Synergistics has a wonderful model that has 3 sections to it: constructive styles, passive defensive styles, and aggressive defensive styles.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, as a leader, you want to be constructive and guide your people towards achievement, not competition.
Yes, right. And so that's the difference, because what you've just described is a manager who's going to be doing pride shifting,
Right.
not shame shifting.
Yes.
And that's why it's kind of characterizing this as old school sorts of behaviors. I wish they weren't done anymore, but you know, you guys all know who my largest client happens to be. And I can tell you that those managers and executives have been in place for so long. Talk about the good old boys network. They are vicious and brutal in their assessments of even their top performers. So it's all shame shifting. Try to move you out grid by making you angry about what's going on, by making you feel like you need to prove them wrong or whatever it happens to be. So where David's really talking about good, solid coaching skills, if I really want to develop my people, then we got to do what David said. How did you characterize those?
Focus on achievement, not competition.
Okay, and so, but you said there were overtly destructive, or what were your 3 categories?
Oh, there's constructive styles, passive defensive styles, and aggressive defensive styles.
Okay, and so you were talking about the
You're kind of talking about the aggressive defensive.
Aggressive defensive, and you're talking
Perfectionist, the competitor.
Yep. That's shame shifting versus if I was the kind of coach or leader that David's describing, doing what the model indicates. In all likelihood, I have someone who's probably a bit further out grid than is necessary for optimal performance. And so I'll do a little bit more of the constructive sorts of stuff in order to just get them to just back off a little bit. You know, I don't need to become the bull in the china shop. I don't need to decide that on my way to finding a few clients who love me, it's okay for me to create a few clients who hate me.
Well, you want them to be thinking, so you want to move them back to the engagement ring.
Right, exactly, right here. So 9-9, anywhere between 9-9, ever so. If I'm really a good solid 10-10, remember that's an amiable driven driver. That amiable tertiary energy, at least make sure that they're keeping people in mind, everybody in mind, themselves and others around them. So, but you're right here, anywhere between this engagement ring, maybe ever so slightly out into execution, but not in the danger zone.
No.
Not in the danger zone. So anyway, I think that's a very good and easy example of outgrid shame shifting. It is a form of manipulation. I don't know how consciously it's being done. Honestly, and I'm sure many of you who have worked with so many clients over so many years, you kind of know that a lot of the people in management positions really aren't bright enough to be as calculating as we've just described.
Just imagine a professional locker room.
There you are. There you are.
And what goes on in that locker room after a loss.
Yep, absolutely. A lot of outgrid shame shifting. Because I got to build a fire underneath you. And again, I don't know they're doing it because they go like, oh, this is an outgrid shame shift. They're not doing that. They're just going like, this is a behavior that has been modeled for me. And so I'm going to duplicate that behavior as I interact with people around me. And so maybe it really is just this kind of inherited behavior as opposed to someone really calculating to do it. Nevertheless, the outcome is the same. It's still shame shifting.
And it's interesting because I was just reading a book that talked about this to the extent of the example that was given was when the San Antonio Spurs lost the NBA championship to the Miami Heat, and how the coach, instead of doing the shame shifting, made dinner reservations for the team and their family members.
Mm-hmm.
Ordered the best wine and made no mention of the game and the series at all during the dinner.
Right.
Yeah. And so to hear the players then talk about the effects of that, even though you had players crying and feeling bad about losing the championship and all, he never talked about the game.
Nope.
Or the series.
Nope. And let's explain how that happens from pride-based leadership. We talk about the 5 unique skills of true leadership. The first one is, again, a leader has the ability to articulate a compelling vision. The second one, a leader has the ability to awaken and sustain desire in the hearts of other people. And the third one is a leader has the ability to create and maintain an environment of pride. That's what we're talking about with the way that he handled this dinner, because a true leader understands that I get my best from people who feel good about who they are, even in the face of failure. Because if I shame shift them, if I do anything like that, I am diminishing them as an individual. What's the likelihood that they're going to, number one, perform better, and number two, even want to perform better?
Or we talk all the time about employees having that go the extra mile mindset.
Yep.
Not happening there.
No. In fact, if anything, if you're going to be berated by your manager, how often do you think that ultimately top performers go, I am not going to subject myself to this kind of behavior again. I'm going to gather my goodies and go. And, so you lose a lot of people, but that's an outgrid shame shift. We would much rather do a pride shift. And if you think about it in the dinner example, it's kind of good to just go like, set that aside, because of this, he knew for certain it's going to be on their mind. How can it not be on their mind? But it doesn't need to become the center of our discussion or of our experience of one another. So let's go to the center of the change grid. Let's be in the moment. Let's find some peace. Let's find some harmony. Let's find that reconnection of who we all are. And as this gets stronger and stronger and stronger, we are better prepared to handle the next test that comes our way. Yeah. Okay, so that's an outgrid shame shift. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
What were those
examples?
3 for the Pride leader you mentioned?
Okay, yeah, the skills of true leadership from Pride-Based Leadership Program. Number 1, leaders have the ability to articulate a compelling vision. And what we mean by that is that they're really good when it comes to speaking before a group or speaking even at an individual level. They have the ability to articulate a compelling vision. Without getting into all the details of Pride-Based Leadership, I want to put emphasis on the word articulate. A leader does not have to have had any hand whatsoever in the authoring of that vision. That vision might have come from the powers that be, from the board, from R&D, from, I don't know where it came from, but a great many people in leadership roles inside of the company have got nothing to do with what the company is doing at a strategic level. But these individuals have been told, this is what we're going to do, communicate this to your people. A leader has the ability to articulate a compelling vision. Whether they had anything to do with authoring that vision is not what it's all about. So they have the ability to articulate a compelling vision. The second is they have the ability to awaken and sustain desire in the hearts of other people. So they really are good at supporting you in wanting whatever your outcome happens to be. And even if your outcome is, they believe that if you are focused on achieving your outcomes, you will achieve the company's outcomes in the process of doing it as a side effect. So they want you to have a sustained desire in your heart for whatever your mission, your vision, your purpose happens to be. The third one is they have the ability to create and maintain an environment of pride. So they want people to feel good about who they are and what they're doing and how it's all going on. They don't stir up any kind of troubled dialogue. They speak with a very consistent voice, focusing on the good stuff that's going on. And that doesn't mean they don't acknowledge that there might have been some problems or some whatever, but they would rather focus on the positive aspects of it and say, what did we learn from this experience? You know, that was the whole thing. And this is again from Pride-Based Leadership. Pride-Based leaders believe that if you do not win, you will learn. So the opposite of winning is not losing. The opposite of winning is learning. And by learning, you're able to then, have a better chance of winning moving forward. The other two, just so you can have all 5 of them, is a leader has the ability to keep people focused on a single clear destination. They don't give you multiple objectives all at once. They go like, we're going to do X. Now, how you get from where you are to X is not the leader's, that's not what the leader's job is. That's what managers' jobs are or whatever, is to figure out all the little intricacies and all that. But the destination, that is a clearly defined, wholly focused kind of thing. And I don't mind sharing with you guys that this is something that's very central to the work that I do with my clients, because in fact, I'll give you an example. With one of my clients, we're working on a rebuild of their website. And early on, I looked at the analytics for their website, found out no one's coming to their website. They don't appear on Google searches whatsoever. So anyone who comes to the website is coming to their website because they were prompted to do so because of an email they received or some marketing blurb kind of thing that they received. You know, no one's just accidentally coming to this website. Yet they get to the website and all the analytics on their website shows that less than 0.5% of visitors ever click beyond the homepage. Less than 0.5% ever click beyond the homepage. So I said, well, we got to get to this. And so we did our little analysis, and the bottom line is that the website is not built for a visitor. it's built more as like a vanity website. It's all the company talking about how great the company is, instead of recognizing these people have come to the website for a specific purpose. And what we need to do is help them find what they're looking for as quickly and easily as possible. That's what we need to do. Instead, people get lost in menus. No one can find anything they're looking for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is a very simple message that 99% of the design of this website must be driven by the expectations of the visitor. And I have said that dozens upon dozens of times, and still I'm constantly trying to get them to stop doing these things that take away from it. That to me is an example of trying to be the leader that keeps people focused on a single destination. All those little other things they want to throw in just, help nobody. Okay, and then the last one is that true leaders have the ability to recognize and develop other true leaders. So these skills about being articulate and focusing on what people really want for themselves and making sure an environment is filled with pride. A lot of people live that. It's their nature to already do that. We can train people to be better at what they're doing, but a true leader has the ability to find people that are just like them and, develop them to the kind of leader that you really want them to be. Yeah. Okay. So those are the 5 thoughts, Brian.
Thank you. That was good.
Yeah. Everything else, by the way, that people want to say is leadership, I promise you, it's not something that is unique to leadership. Like one study that was done, a prominent study, I wish I could tell you who conducted it, but a very prominent name in the world of business research, because it was published in the Wharton School. Maybe they did it, don't remember. But anyway, they did a little study for my very large client, and they said the question was, moving into the next 10 years, what do you think are the most important skills for a leader to possess? Okay, number 1 on the list is creativity. And I kind of went like, well, number 1, I don't really know that creativity is a skill, but okay, we'll assume it is for a second. Number 2, I don't believe it's unique to a leader. I think that creativity is something that should probably be part of a great many people's roles throughout the entire organization. So am I saying leaders shouldn't be creative? No, I'm saying that creativity is not a leadership skill. And the question was, what are the most important skills they have moving forward? Well, if you look at the list, you had to get down to number 7 or 8 on the list before a leadership skill actually appeared. They were all management skills or whatever. So you just go like, have we really lost sight of what leadership actually is? And I think the sad answer to that is yes, we have. Yep. Okay. Anywho, let's continue our discussion around shame shifting. Now, while outgrid shame shifting is something that we encounter very frequently, the good thing about outgrid shame shifting is that it's noticeable. If you tune into it, you can see it because it speaks itself. It's noisy. It's loud. You can actually see it, hear it, witness it. Well, downgrid shame shifting is another little thing. So the goal of downgrid shame shifting is to move someone into the downgrid danger zone to lower their level of tension to the point that they end up, what do I say, kind of relinquishing their control to another person. They become so comfortable in whatever their kind of myth of reality is that they don't see that anything is really happening around them. So people that are...
This is kind of a negative way to get to the threshold of delegation.
The negative way to get to the threshold of delegation, to get someone to willingly relinquish their personal control to another person. So how you end up doing that is by giving people messages that everything is absolutely okay. These are non-issues. Everything, there is nothing really going on. It's all just, you know, a show. And so they will deny that anything is happening that would move, otherwise move someone upgrid. So they can deny it altogether, or they can put no attention on it whatsoever. So just by virtue of the fact that no one's talking about it, it becomes less and less of an issue. So by giving you all of these false reassurances, or creating this kind of false narrative about how perfect and happy everything is, this is enhancing your sense of control. It's boosting your level of ability, even giving people messages like, we're the greatest company ever. We've got the proven track record. You know, it's dangerous whenever someone starts believing their own PR. So if you read your own marketing materials and you kind of go like, I'm so good, it's probably moved your level of tension downgrade. Why? But because it's giving you, pardon me, it is revisiting, re-emphasizing what your ability is. And so that inflates your sense of ability. It can also diminish the perceived challenge that you're experiencing around something. So the more smoke I can blow up your butt, the more likely you are to end up downgrade. And the further and further downgrade you go, as David just pointed out, the more likely you are to, number one, not pay any attention, not even notice that anything is going on, and allow others to make the decisions for you. And that can become very problematic, very problematic. Thoughts, questions, comments about downgrade shame shifting? No?
This one's a little bit more insidious
Mm-hmm.
than the outgrid is, because you could almost look at this as someone trying to boost you up.
Yep. Yep,
instead
yep,
of
yep.
instead of tear you down.
That's right. That's right. They're doing their very best to get you to enhance your perception of your ability, your knowledge, your skill, all of it.
You can do this all day. You've done this 1,000 times. Aren't you tired of this?
Exactly. You know, this is something you don't need to be troubling yourself with anymore. I can take care of this for you, you know, so you got better things to do with your time. It's so beneath you to, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it's all just a big manipulation to let your, you know, put your guard down. Okay, now let's go to the opposite of that. Shame shifting that moves you upgrid. Now, what kind of languaging accompanies that? And again, I'm the person who's trying to get you to relinquish your power to me.
Very coarse language.
Mm-hmm. And what is what
That's
I'm trying
my response. Very
Well,
coarse language.
Yeah, because what you're trying to do is emphasize to this person, confront them with the fact that they do not have the ability necessary to handle the challenge. So shame on them for being in that situation, but they better count their blessings that I'm here to save their butts. You know, so it's like, you can't handle this situation. We need to come to your rescue. That's the language of someone who's up, because again, the person that they're already even slightly upgraded, they're already questioning their lack of ability to be in the situation they're in, and they're starting to feel like, how did they even let this happen to themselves? And then you'll have other people come around who just goes, look what you did. How did you do this? Blah, blah, blah. And they're trying to just move you further and further and further upgrid. Well, why? Because at a certain point, when you're that far upgrade, your language, again, go back to the very basic training and tension management. Stress sounds like this. I know I need to do something, but I don't know what to do. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Anything you say is fine with me. Please help me. I'm out of control. And so these people are very easy to manipulate into doing things they otherwise would never have thought about doing, because they're being told to do it, and they're being told that there is a threat that is far greater than anything they are prepared to handle, and that they're going to lose things far greater than they ever imagined they could possibly lose, and that it's actually happening and it's going to get worse. So all of this gloom, doom, death, and despair kind of messaging can move people into the upgrade danger zone, where they become highly reactive and become quite the easily manipulated army of followers.
We're seeing this a lot in the healthcare industry, in particular with medical students and residents who are immigrants, and they talk about bullying. And so there was a scathing report on this rise in suicides among immigrant medical students and residents because of the bullying, because of the hierarchical nature, and talk about how the chief residents and the attending officers would tell them different things that really just shoot them down. And so they're never really learning. And they go into isolation and ultimately commit suicide. It's very sad.
Well, I think now what you're describing is that sometimes behaviors that the perpetrator exhibits could move out out grid, but could move people up grid. Because I got to believe in that world of medical students, there are some that take that messaging and hear them as fighting words, and they're going to really just, step further out grid and prove that individual wrong. And other people are going to buy what that individual is saying, hook, line, and sinker, and end up very far up grid, where they have a highly reactive, self-destructive, behavior or phase that they enter into.
So you know what made me think about this, the way you framed it, they had something to lose. Because think about it, if you're an immigrant student, you're on a visa, you get kicked out of a program, you have to go. You're
going home, right?
Exactly.
Right.
So that they didn't want to do that, and so they'll tolerate that to the point where it becomes toxic for themselves.
Exactly. And, even take it out of the realm of the medical school, how often are people in the country, whether they're in the country, legally, illegally, just set that issue aside for just a second, but they're working perhaps as a domestic in a household, and the owners of the household are mistreating them, perhaps violating them in any way you can imagine violation could occur. But the threat that hangs over their head is you better not say anything about it. Otherwise, going to have you deported and have you whatever and all that. So, yeah. Yep. Okay, to finish it off, we'll talk about in-grid shame shifting. In-grid shame shifting is perhaps the most disgusting of them all. Because keep in mind the in-grid person, and again, I always have to remind people that while I might occasionally say something about an in-grid person, where you are on the change grid is not about your personality. It is about your way of responding to a specific situation at a particular moment in time. So you guys just have to kind of know that that's what I'm saying. No matter what I'm saying, that's what I'm saying. It's specific to that. That being said, if you do a change grid and find out that virtually every single activity on the change grid ends up plotting very far in grid, it would not be a gigantic leap to kind of generalize that plotting to a whole lot of stuff that isn't on the change grid, but is actually part of that person's reality or their normal way of responding to things. So while this is never intended to be any kind of like a personality sort of test or anything like that, I do believe it reveals patterns. And if the pattern ends up being strong enough, I can certainly see how we could reasonably generalize that to, a greater understanding of the person. Fair enough, though. So I'm talking about an in-grid person. So an in-grid person, look at this in-grid quadrant. And again, I'll draw to your attention that what makes the in-grid quadrant unique among the other three, or among all four of them, is that all 5 levels of productive tension are present. That's not the case anywhere else. Every other place on the change grid, only 3 levels of productive tension occur in each of the upgrade, outgrid, or downgrade quadrant. Only 3 levels of tension, and not necessarily even the entire level of tension. You get in grid, all 5 levels of tension are present at the exact same proportions, ratios that they are if you look at the whole grid. So we say an in-grid individual operates in a much smaller world. So their world isn't one that goes all the way out to perceived challenges of 12 and mastering something to an ability of 12. And certainly there's no superhero behavior. Their world is smaller. And the further in grid they end up moving, in fact, each of these individuals, we could say, what's their idea of an outgrid experience? They might consider outgrid to be nothing further out than 3-3, but inside of 3-3, look at this tiny little amiable subquadrant. All 5 levels of tension are present, and they're all there in the exact same ratios. Just go over here to the corner, or this little tiny square that's 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, just that little tiny square. All 5 levels of tension are present, and they're present in the in normal ratios, standard ratios. So that's what I'm saying. They just live in a much smaller world, a simpler life, whatever label you want to put around it. So they're already not out here living the crazy kind of life that the whole change grid would encompass. Now have that individual receive messages that say, you're nothing, you can't do anything, you have no ability, and so you can only handle the simplest, most menial kinds of things. So anyone who's going to be abusing that individual psychologically, spiritually, maybe physically abusing that individual, can you see how that's making them feel even worse about themselves than they already do? So that behavior, in-grid shame shifting, is just really cruel, and it's brutal, and it's just, I think, the most abhorrent of all of the shame shifts that can occur, because it is so deeply abusive. And I don't believe it's even being done for any even imagined benefit to the individual. At least the person who's doing outgrid shame shifting can say, I'm just trying to get the best out of a competitive person. And you can get the best out of a competitive person by throwing down the gauntlet, So at least there's this imagined benefit that can be derived from those old school, good old boy network kinds of behaviors. And they'll even say, well, I'm moving them up grid or I'm moving them down grid because I know that they don't know enough about what's going on. So I need them to just let me make the decisions for them. And so let's move you down grid so you'll relinquish control. Let's move you up grid so you need me to rescue you. So at least there's something going on. This is just being brutal to a person. This is just being abusive to a person. And generally, this behavior, shape-shifting behavior, is coming from an outgrid person. So, yeah. Okay, so anyone, can you relate to what I've just described here as this in-grid shame shift?
Well, I'll tell you what it makes me think of is in our conversation on unconscious bias, one of the things we talk about is micro-messaging. And how that can show up as micro inequities or microaggression.
That's right.
And it's just these subtle behaviors that, the individual may not even recognize that they're demonstrating towards someone. The impact is huge.
Right. That's right. That's right. And again, it's not necessarily just, generally it's outgrid people that are the perpetrators, and the in-grid people are the victims. It's not necessarily a one-to-one thing. It's not like one perpetrator is directing all this to one individual. What if this is happening at more of a societal or a cultural level, and you've got a whole group of outgrid bully type perpetrators, whatever, who are well, I mean, I try not to get too societal or too political, but I'm saying we live in the laboratory of life. And so we conceal this. But what happens if all that gets directed to a particular culture? You know, a particular, group of people, historically, or whatever the case may be. And so I would say to you that all forms of racism come from some sort of outgrid perpetrator trying to somehow or another squash the esteem of another group of people. And so as a result, sooner or later, friction's going to develop, and people can only be pushed so far for so long until there's going to be a breaking point. And isn't it interesting how very often, again, remember that the outgrid, the 4 danger zones are all neighbors of one another when we turn this into a 3-dimensional sphere in that case. So how frequently do we hear about this very controlled, abused individual suddenly becoming the abuser? And how often do we hear the person who's been the abuser say, well, now I'm the one who's being victimized. People don't understand me. They don't do whatever. It's so interesting how fast the bullies will play the victim card. But it's not surprising at all how sooner or later, some of those victims are going to react in a rather outgrid kind of way. Kind of way. Yep. All right. So yeah.
A product of unawareness, because it seems like, with human behavior in general, a lot of it is a lot of unconscious processing. So it seems like the perpetrator, some might use it in a very manipulative way, but there's an element of unawareness there in terms of they only know what they know.
Well, that's true. So let's make this something very specific to the change grid. I'm going to change it to the change sphere for just a second, so don't get too weirded out if that's not something you've wrapped your head around. But again, if we were to take this 2-dimensional diagram and print it out on a piece of fabric and drape it over a ball, those 4 red spots would become the South Pole, and they would all become the exact same spot. So I think what's really going on is that you've got these people that are living on the dark side of the change sphere, where no light ever shines, where it's only the danger zones interacting with one another on a continuous kind of basis. And because for there, people think, if you look at it 2-dimensionally, the only way I can move from outgrid to in-grid is by going through the center of the change grid. Well, when you put this into its 3-dimensional spherical kind of depiction, you find out, oh no, I can get from outgrid to in-grid in a very small movement, because these are neighbors. They're physically adjacent to one another. They share that one point, which means I never go through the bright side of the change sphere. I never go through these healthy levels. And so what do you think happens when a society ends up being populated by the majority being in one or more of these danger zones all day, every day?
Well,
and I can tell you,
culture.
Yeah, and that's, I think, where we're at. That's what's really happening. The Roman civilization collapsed and fell. There's nothing saying ours can't do likewise. So, and the only way to cure it is that there needs to be some group of people who recognize that the way to get people back into harmony, to get people back into some sort of balance, is to do what we can do to pride shift these people into a healthier spot on the change grid. As long as they're in the danger zones, they will continue to operate from that danger zone and the neighboring zones as they move around or get into issues with one another. We need to be that voice of reason. And that's where Tim was bringing up, it's about conflict management. It's about learning how to be a mediator, how to find common ground, how to facilitate those kinds of exercises that help people understand and embrace and maybe even celebrate differences. Yeah, anyway, there you go.
This is going to be really good. I just read a report from McKinsey that talked about a lot of those things you just mentioned are going to be exacerbated because now there's this conflict of, organizations want to get people back to the office. People don't want to go back to the office. And so it kept talking about this idea of the hybrid
Mhm.
and what that's going to do to the future of work and how
Oh,
they
yeah.
can try to reconcile the differences there.
Yep. In fact, I saw an article yesterday that said that right now there are more job openings than there are people on unemployment.
Wow.
So what's stopping more people from, tapping into this? And there's a lot of answers to that question. But if we want to get people back to work, we have to look at what are those things that are stopping them from returning to work and see how we can help it. Is it a fear of COVID? Is it that they don't even want to take care of their kids? Is it, whatever it is, it has to be kind of
$300 extra
explored.
dollars a week in unemployment.
Yeah, well, but that stopped most places. That stopped. Arizona stopped it over a month
Not in
ago, month and a half
Michigan.
ago. No, it's still there. Yeah, no. Mm-mm.
Well, we got a Democratic governor.
Yeah, well, but see, even then you want to go back and say, well, assume for a second that that was changed. We can tell you in Arizona that even though the $300 was taken away, and by the way, Arizona has the second lowest unemployment compensation rate in the entire country. So you don't even get $300 from your unemployment, period. So no one's making any money on regular unemployment here. Nevertheless, we in our state have more job openings than we have people on unemployment. And it's not that $300 incentive. So something else is going on, and we got to figure out whatever that happens to be. But all that said, our remedy is going to be the same. We have to find a way to help these people that are living in the distorted realities that are found out-grid, up-grid, down-grid, and in-grid. We have to help them to come back into where life is really lived and work is really being done, instead of just get into the arguments and the issues that these 4 danger zones end up living when they're in conflict with one another. Or just period for that matter. Yeah. Okay.
That work that Tim was talking about then becomes really about helping people to get out of their own way.
Yeah. Well, if you really, truly want to have a positive impact on society, we have to fix these extremes. The extremes have to be put in place. I don't care whose extreme it is. I don't care what the extreme is. Nothing good happens at an extreme. So we have to do something to find balance and harmony, open dialogue and discussion, an appreciation for one of the people we'll be talking about starting on Thursday is Edward Filene. I would encourage you guys to look up Filene. It's Filene. He's best known for Filene's department store, I think in Philadelphia, but he's the one who created created credit unions and a lot of other very progressive things as far as that all kinds of goes. Well, one of the things that Filene said is that if you follow the facts, you will find the truth. And that's one of the things that moves people out of these danger zones, is when you can actually have them to share and test whatever facts they believe they hold. And as those facts are tested and those facts end up being either proven or disproven, as the case may be, you get closer and closer and closer to the truth. And yeah, that's it. Because right now, these 4 extremes all have very distorted understandings of what the truth really is.
So really the danger zones are points of irrationality.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the layers of the change grid we looked at was about radial trends on the change grid. And absolutely, when you're in any of these extremes, you become, you become emotionally ruled. You become irrational. Logic has fallen by the wayside. I'll give you another one. Let's talk about Brian's thing. If I only looked at the neurotransmitters found in these 4 danger zones, I'm going to find high concentrations of dopamine all the way around the change grid. I'm going to find lots of adrenaline, epinephrine, lots of endorphins. These are all things that are, I don't know the right lingo in a medical world, but these are excitatory.
Yes.
And so as a result, they're going to create their own reality and end up prompting behaviors that aren't there. So I go back to this idea that what's lacking there is serotonin. And so Diane's little joke, it becomes more and more, I think, valuable every day. She goes, we should be adding an SSRI to the water supply. So you know, the whole world would be better off if it just had a little bit more success in serotonin staying where it belongs. So, okay, anyway, that's it for now. So, all right, with that, starting on Thursday, let's talk a little bit about conflict, where it lives on the change grid, the different shapes it takes depending on where the two players are, or two or more players are involved in the conflict, and how we go about resolving things. So with that, thanks so much, everybody, for joining in. Talk to you on Thursday.
Great
Thank
day.
you.
Thanks.
right.
Bye. Bye.
Good night, everyone. All right, ciao.